Hi all, welcome to CodAffection. In this video, we have discussed all you need to know about implementing MySQL CRUD operations with a Node.js API. Things like how to connect with a MySQL database, then how to implement insert, update, delete and retrieve using direct queries and also with already existing stored procedures. So please watch till the very end of the video. Now, without further ado, let's get started with creating the Node.js project inside this folder. For that, first of all, we have to open command prompt from the same folder directory. So here is the shortcut. Just replace this folder path with the command cmd, then hit enter, so that the command prompt will be opened from the same folder directory here. Now, to create the Node.js project, just execute this command npm init. I will name this project as Node.js MySQL CRUD. For rest of the configurations, we will keep the default values, so we just need to keep hitting enter like this. Finally, to confirm the configurations that we have provided, just type y for yes. So as a result of this command execution, here we have a new file package.json. Now let's open this folder inside VS Code. Before that, let's clear this command prompt with this command cls. Now let's open this folder inside VS Code editor. Now before going forward with this Node.js project, let's set up a MySQL DB. For that, here is my workbench. Now from this left panel, you could see the tab for schemas. Inside that, right click, then create schema. Inside this project, we are dealing with employee details. So I will name this schema or DB as employee DB. To create the DB, click on this apply button. So here is the corresponding SQL script for creating the DB. Click on this apply button to execute the script here. That's it. So here we have the new DB, employee DB. Now I'm going to create a table inside the DB. For that, let me open this SQL tab here. Now I'll copy paste the script for creating the table. Don't worry, I'll be providing this MySQL script in the GitHub repository. So here we are going to create the table employees inside the employee DB. More about the containing column will be discussed in a bit. Now to execute this table creation script, click on this lightning symbol here. Boom, that's it. You could see the newly created table inside this tables node here. So here we have the table employees. Now let's check its design. So these are the containing columns: ID, name, employee code and salary. And we have set this primary key column ID as auto increment, so that we don't want to insert values into it. It will start from 1 and increment by 1 upon new record insertion. Now obviously the table is empty. Now to get started with this DB, I'm going to insert few employees into this table. For that, let me open one more SQL tab and I will be copy pasting the insert script like this. Click on execute. Boom, that's it. So here we have inserted 4 employees into the table. You could check that inside this employees table by re-executing this query, select query. So that's it. So here we have inserted 4 employees into the table. Now within this employees table, we're gonna implement the CRUD operations from this Node.js API here. So these are the required npm packages to get started with the application. First of all, we have MySQL 2, which helps us to query MySQL databases from our Node.js application. Actually, there is another package called MySQL. Here is the package. This package also serves the same purpose. I have used this package in one of my old Node.js video, but in this project we'll be using this MySQL 2 package, which is the latest and fastest. And then obviously we have this Express package. So this is what makes our Node.js application into a RESTful API. And here we have the final package, body parser, which helps us to convert the incoming body request into a JSON format. So let's install these 3 packages into our application. MySQL 2 Express body parser, hit enter. So here we have done with the installation. You could check them inside this package.json under dependencies. Now let's start with connecting DB using this package MySQL 2. You could see the detailed explanation on using the package inside this npm page here. Actually, it provides 2 ways to connect with the DB. First of all, we have create connection method, and here we have the create pool method. This pool method has some advantage that it helps us to reduce this time spent in connecting with the MySQL server by reusing a previous connection, leaving them open instead of closing when you are done with them. While in case of this conventional method, which is this create connection method, we have to close the connection once we are done with the query execution. So I'll be using the connection pool method. So first of all, I'm going to create a file called db.js. Now first of all, let's import the package MySQL to. Now I'm going to create a pool object called MySQL pool. So here we go. We just need to invoke this method, create pool. Inside that we have to pass this object containing the DB credentials. So first of all, we have host. Since we are using local DB, it would be localhost. Then username, then password, then database name. Now this package has another feature called promise wrapping, so that we can execute a query like executing a promise. We're going to discuss that in a bit. For that, we just need to import the package from this subdirectory here. So import the package from MySQL to promise. Now with this MySQL pool object, we can execute any query we want from the DB. But before that, we have to make sure whether it is possible to make a successful connection with this given credentials or not. Usually in other ways of connecting with the DB, there will be a method, something called connect, which helps us to know whether a connection is possible with the given credentials or not. But unfortunately, with these NPM packages like this, there is no such method. So we're going to do something very simple like this. We're going to execute a simple query, a hard-coded query like this. Select 1. So if there is any error in executing this simple select query here, it will be related to the given credentials here. And I think it is really important to check the correctness of these given credentials before actually executing a real query. Now since we are using the promise wrapping, we can work with the query result as a promise using this method then and catch. Now if there is any error, we will do this DB connection failed. And inside the next line, we will print the error object. Now inside the success callback, let's print this returned object. Okay, fine. Let's execute this db.js file, nodedb.js. Oops, DB connection failed, access denied for the given user. Don't worry, I was just messing with you guys. There is no user with this given username. Let's be real. Root password 1234. Now we have to re-execute this node command. So instead of that, I strongly recommend this npm package called nodemon. This package helps us to automatically restart the application when a file inside the directory changes. It is better to install the package globally in your machine so that you can use this package in any Node.js application. Since I have already installed this package, I'm not going to do that again. So make sure to install this package if you haven't already. So here we go, nodemon db.js. Boom, that's it. Don't worry, this is the success response that we have inside this then method here. So this is the ender response returned from executing this select query here. So always when you execute a query, it will return an array like this. And the result what we are looking for will be there inside this first item here. So here we have the record returned as a result of executing this select one query. So here we have the one returned within this column name 1. Now we can say that we have made a successful connection with the MySQL server. Now let's rewrite this success callback. DB connection succeeded. Now let's start the Express server that will be done inside the root JavaScript file index.js. So let's create the file index.js. First of all, we'll import the package Express. Then as always, we have to create this app object to work with the Express package. We'll be just calling this method Express that we have just imported here. In order to combine both of these variable declarations into one statement, we could do this. After the Express, we need another constant called app, and which is created by invoking the previously imported or created method Express. Now let's start this server within this port number 3000. And here we have the success callback. Inside that, we will just print this server started at the given port number. Now I think it is better to start the Express server once we make a successful DB connection. So I'm going to do this. From this db.js file, I will export this MySQL pool by default. For that, we could do this module.exports is equal to MySQL pool. Now we can import this inside this index.js. Normally I keep both package import and local import separately like this. So let's import the MySQL pool here. I'll import it as db from the file db.js file. Now instead of validating the correctness of these given credentials here, I'm going to move this into this index.js here. Now we have to call this query method from this imported DB. Now let's expand this success callback and let's start the server inside the success callback here. Because there is no point in starting the Express server if you are not able to connect with the DB, right? So first of all, we have verified the correctness of the given DB credentials, and then we have started the Express server at the port number 3000. Now let's retrieve the existing employees from this employees table. For that, I'm going to add a specific controller. So first of all, I will add this folder, controllers. Inside that, we will have this controller, employee controller. First of all, let's import the Express server, and then from that we have to create another object called router so that we can invoke this method router from Express. Now I'm going to create a get web method here. Router.get can be called. For now, the corresponding path will be just a /. We will append the base route into it in a bit. Now as a second parameter, we can pass this function to handle the request with these parameters, request and response. For now, we'll just return this sample text list of employees. At the end of this controller, we will just import this router by default. Now let's add this router into the running instance inside this index.js. First of all, we have to import the router here. Configuring the route can be done inside the middleware. That we can make use of this method app.use. So here we have the base path API/employees. So all the requests starting with this pattern will be handled inside this employee controller. Instead of this generic name, let it be employee routes. Now we just need to pass the same here. So the corresponding URL for this get web method will be like this: http localhost. We have started the server from the port number 3000, and then we have to append this base path of the controller, and then here we have the /. That's it. We can make get request with your browser itself like this. Just paste the URL here, then hit enter. So here we have this string response list of employees. So that's how routes works. You can only test get requests from web browsers like this. In order to test other types of requests like post, put or delete, you can use this software called Postman, but in this project I will be using the VS Code extension called Thunder Client. So here is the extension. I have already installed this extension on this IDE. You could see that here, Thunder Client. Now click on this new request here. Now let's make the get request to this URL. Click on send. So that's it. Now within this extension, we can make any type of request: get, post, put, delete, etc. Now let's modify this request handler to retrieve the actual list of employees from the table employees here. To do so, we have to repeat the catch method for all query executions. So here we go. We are inside this employees controller. So to get outside this folder, we can do this, then db.js. Now here we go. db.query method can be called, and here is the corresponding SQL query: select star from employees. Now here we have the success callback. Let's name this parameter as data for now. Now we'll return the object as it is inside the response. If there is any error, we can catch that here, and we'll print the error object as it is. Now let me save this. Nodemon already restarted this server here. Now let's make the request again. Boom, that's it. So here we have the returned array. So as always, it will be an array, and we only need the first item inside this array, and rest of the items inside the array are metadata of entities or columns involved in the query. So instead of returning the entire array, we'll only return the first item in it. Let's make the request again. That's it. So here we have an array of employee records. Now instead of using this promise method, I'm going to use the async avoid keywords. So let me remove this then success method, and let's prefix this method invocation with this keyword avoid, and we are only allowed to use this avoid keyword inside an async function. So I will just prefix this method with this keyword async. Now, in order to receive the data returned from this method invocation, we will assign this method invocation into this variable rows. Now, if you are not familiar with async await, I strongly recommend you to have a better understanding on these concepts like callback, promise, async await, etc. I have given a tutorial link in video description. It gives a better explanation on explaining these three concepts. Now, finally, I will send this object like this, rows. Let's make this request again. See, this time we have the whole array like we had in previous case. In order to retrieve the first element inside the array, we can go for the JavaScript destructuring syntax. For example, here we have an array, colors. Inside that we have 3 colors in it. Now we can destructure colors inside them like this. Color 1, color 2, and let's assign the array here, colors. Now let's print these variables into the developer console. So currently we are using code sandbox, and here we have the corresponding inner console tab. Let's reload this page. So here we have the 2 items that we have destructured from this colors array. Now if you only want the first element inside the array, we can do this, color 1, that's it. Reload the page. See, currently we are only retrieving the first element, green. Like this, we're gonna retrieve the first element inside this whole array. For that, we'll use this destructuring syntax. Now this is corresponding to the first element inside the returned array. Now let's make the request again. Boom, that's it. Now if you want to master JavaScript destructuring syntax and REST parameter, I have given a video tutorial link in video description. Please go through it. Now back to VS Code. Now I think it is better to move all of these DB related operations into a respective service file. So I'm gonna create this folder here, services. And inside that we will have this employee service. Now let me cut this DB import and pasting inside this service class. Now I'm going to define this method get all employees. So I will define this method as async. We don't have any parameter for this method. Now let's move this method invocation into this service method. And finally, we will be returning this rows array. So this contains all of the employees inside the employees table. Now, along with defining this method, I want to export the same. So I will do this module.exports.getEmployees. Now let's import this service class as a whole here. Service. So let's invoke the method getAllEmployees. And here we have the avoid keyword, and the returned array can be accepted like this, employees. Let's make the request again. That's it. So that's all about organizing the code into control and service class files. Now next we are going to talk about global error handling inside the project. And let's return a string response like this, and let's return a response like this, and let's return a string response like this. Now in order to avoid this, we are going to have a global error handling so that we can catch all of the errors inside the application at a given place. Express middleware inside this index.js. So here we go. App.use method can be called. Into that we just need to pass a request handler like this. It is having 4 parameters: error, request, response, and next. So the request handler must have these, and that's how the Express identifies this as a global error handler. Okay. Now inside this global error handler, we will just print the error object like this during update operation. We'll talk about the return of say something went wrong. Now along with this string response, we can return a status code like this, status, and we can pass the status code 500, meaning something went wrong inside the server. So this will catch all of the errors inside the application. And that doesn't mean you can't handle any error inside your application anywhere. If there is any unexpected error inside the application, that will be catched with this middleware, and if you throw any error in between the execution, and that will also be reached here. So if you have specified already a status code instead of 500, we have to consider that here. So we could do this status. Sorry, here we have misspelled status method. So while handling the error internally inside the application other than this index.js, if you have already given a status, that will be assigned to the response. Otherwise, we will use this status 500 as a default. Now, if you check the Express documentation, so here we have the home page of the Express package, and you could see the corresponding documentation inside this error handling. Let me open that inside a new tab. Here we have the same global error handler middleware. But defining this global error handler is not enough to handle all of the errors inside the application. Let me show you what I meant by that. Let's try to execute a wrong SQL query. For example, I will change this select keyword here like this. If we execute this query, we will get an error for sure. And as per the documentation here, it must be handled inside this global error handler here. Let's check whether it works or not. Let's try to make the same request again. Oops, we got an error, that's for sure, but it's not handled inside this global error handler here because we are not getting this text message inside this response. It's a plain error. You could conclude the same if you look into the terminal where we have started this server. The app is crashed, meaning that the error is not handled inside the project, or you could say the error is not reached inside the global error handler here. So the reason for not working this global error handler is that we have used async request handlers inside this Express package. In order to work this global error handler with async avoid request handlers, we have to install the Express 5 version. But at present, we only have Express 4 stable versions. If you go to the home page, you could see that here we have a beta version of Express 5. So the solution would be you could install the beta version of the Express package. You could see the corresponding documentation here. You can replace the Express 4 package with this Express 5 beta version. In future, while you are watching this video, if the Express package has a stable version of Express 5, you don't need to worry, this global error handler must work. Since it has been a long time waiting for the Express 5 package, you should know these things. I'm going to give you an additional solution, which is installing this npm package, Express Async Errors. So this is the package. You just need to install this package. So there are two solutions. If you don't have a stable version of Express 5, install this Express 5 beta version instead of Express 4 package, or you can install this package. Instead of going for the beta version, I'm going to install this extra package here. Once you install the package, you just need to import the package inside the file where you have added routes into Express server. Since we are adding all of the routes inside the application into Express middleware from this index.js, I'm going to import the package here. So you just need to import the package where you have added the routes into the Express server. Let's try to execute the wrong SQL query again. Boom, we got the string response from the global error handler here. That's it. So that's all about global error handling. Now, since we have this global error handler implemented here, we don't need a generic catch method like this for every query execution. It will be handled inside the global error handler here. Now let me correct the typo here. Next, we are going to retrieve a specific record with a given ID. For that, first of all, let's define a method inside the service class here. For that, I will duplicate this method and let's name this method as getEmployeeById. For this method, we have a single parameter ID, which is the employee ID. Now let's add the work clause here, where ID is equal to ID that we have passed into the method. Now back to the employee controller. Sorry, here we have a typo inside this URL. As you can see inside this request, we need 2 / before localhost. That's it. Now let's add a getWeb method corresponding to this newly added method here. For that, I will copy paste this getWeb method. Now for this getWeb method, we expect an ID query parameter. And we'll call this method getEmployeeById, and we have to pass the corresponding employee ID here. Now it's better to rename this variable as employee because we only expect a single employee record. Let's save this, then back to the Thunder client. First of all, let's retrieve all of the existing employees. So these are the employees that we have inside the employee table. Now let's try to retrieve a single employee with this given ID. For that, we just need to pass the corresponding ID at the end of the request like this, so that it will be handled inside this getWeb method. Let's make the request. Boom, that's it. Now there is a possibility of SQL injection in generating the SQL strings through string concatenation like this. Now if you are not familiar with SQL injection, in brief you just need to understand this. Whatever we have passed as the ID here will be directly concatenated to the strings here. Thereby a hacker can easily pass some manipulative SQL strings at the end of the URI here, like dropping the table or deleting all of your records from the table, etc. In brief, that's all you need to understand about SQL injection. In order to avoid this, you can use the pre-prepared statements as mentioned inside this MySQL 2 documentation here. Thereby, we'll be marking the places where we want to replace some values like this. And the value for this placeholder will be passed as a second parameter inside the array in the respective order. Now let's modify this query accordingly. We'll add the question mark here. Instead of this concatenation, we'll pass this array as a second parameter, and let's pass the ID here. So this is what we meant by pre-prepared statements. The first question mark will be replaced by the first element inside the array, and that's how it works. Now both of these string and the value array will be passed separately into the SQL server, and thereby we can avoid the SQL injection. Now since we are retrieving a single record, let's rename this variable to something like raw. It's a DB terminology. Let's change that into record, and let's change this into records. Now let's try whether it works or not. That's it. Now suppose we are passing an ID which is not present inside the employees table, for example 5. We will get this empty array. We have to handle that inside the web method here. For that, we'll do this if employee.length is equal to 0. We have to set the status code to 404, meaning not found what you are looking for. And we'll send this JSON response no record with given ID. And here we have the else part. Now let's try the same. See, now we have the response 404, no record with the given ID 5. So that's all about this get web method. Now let's try to implement the delete operation before insert and update. So I will just copy paste this method here, and here we have the service method delete employee. We already have the ID parameter. Now the corresponding delete query will be like this: delete from employees where ID is the given ID. For now, let's keep this variable as it is. Let's define a corresponding delete web method here. Then I will copy paste this below, and this request is of the type delete. We expect an ID parameter, and here we have the method delete employee. Here also we have the possibility of not finding the given employee ID. So we'll need this if else block here in a bit. For now, I will just comment it like this. Let's return this response deleted successfully. So currently we have these much employees. Now let me delete this employee with the ID 2. So here is the corresponding URL, and we have to change this request method into delete. So when we execute this, the return object will be passed to this record, and it is returned to the web method here. Now to see what is returned from the operation, let's print the variable here. Let's make the request. Boom. Let's check whether the corresponding record is already deleted or not. See, there is no employee with the ID 2. Now let's check the return object. So this is what is being returned after the delete operation. Inside that, you could see the property affected rows. It indicates that how many records or rows are deleted from the table. So currently it is 1 employee is deleted. Now if you try to delete an employee which is not present inside the table, it should be 0. Let's check that. Make this request again, because at present there is no employee with this ID 2. Even now we are getting this string response deleted successfully that we can fix in a bit. Now if you check this return object, you see affected rows is 0 because no record is being deleted. So by looking into this property affected rows, we can tell how many records being affected with the delete operation. So instead of returning this rows from this service method, we can return like this record.affected rows, and thereby we can tell if there is an employee with the given ID or not. So let's change this variable name to affected rows. Let's uncomment this if else block. If affected rows is equal to 0, we will return this for not for response saying that no record with the given ID. Else we will send this response deleted successfully. So hope you understood how it works. Now let's make the request again. Boom, we got the response for not for no record with the given ID. Now there is an employee with the ID 4. Now let's try to delete him. See, deleted successfully. Now instead of accepting the entire object returned from the delete operation, you can just destructure this specific property that I have already discussed in my JavaScript tutorial. Link is there in video description. So instead of just destructuring the first element inside the array, from the first array, we have to destructure this property affected rows. So here we are creating a new constant affected rows. Its value will be assigned from objects like this. Now let's return this variable as it is. Now let's verify that by deleting the already deleted record. See, it's working perfectly fine. So here we have gone for in-depth destructuring. So that's all about delete operation. Now let's go for insert and update operation. Now for insert and update operation, I want to do the operation through stored procedure instead of generating the query from this Node.js project like this. So a stored procedure gives you the reusability of procedures in various applications. You use this same DB. So in order to create a stored procedure, you can right click on this stored procedures, then click on create stored procedure. I have already prepared a stored procedure for these two operations. Let me paste that here. I have given this script in the GitHub repository. When you're executing this script, make sure that you are executing that from the window open through this create stored procedure. So inside this stored procedure, employee add or edit, we are implementing both of the operations add or edit. Based on the value of the passed ID, we can decide whether we have an insert or update operation. For insert operation, ID will be 0. So we will be inserting a new employee with the given values here. And for the update operation, we will update those columns for the given ID. Independent of the operation, at the end of the procedure, we are returning this row count. It indicates number of rows affected through either of these operations, insert or update. And we are returning that with this column name affected rows, same as that we have here inside this delete operation. So this will be helpful for update operation. I will be explaining that in a bit. Now to create this stored procedure, click on apply. That's it. So here we have the new stored procedure USP employee add or edit. Now let's look how to invoke that from our Node.js project here. For that, first of all, let's create a service method called add or edit employee. Now for this method, we have two parameters, object and the ID. Now for insert operation inside this first parameter obj, we are expecting the values of the employee which is to be added. And for the update operation, it will contain the modified values of the object. Based on the value of the ID here, we'll decide whether we have an insert or update operation. Now by default, I will set the value 0 for this parameter. So if there is no value provided for the second parameter, then this ID will be having the value 0 and it will go for the insert operation. To invoke this stored procedure here, we can do this call the name of the stored procedure, and here we have a pair of parentheses like we are invoking a method, and here we have to pass the values for these parameters here one by one. So here we go, 4 question marks. So here we are using the pre-prepared statement like we have done for this delete and this get web method here. Now we can pass the values into it like this. First of all, we have the ID, then name, employee code and salary. So here we go, obj.name, employee code and salary. And the return object or the record will consist of a column called affected rows, and that's what we are retrieving here. Talk about the return object during update operation. Now let's add the corresponding web methods inside the controller. For that, let me copy paste this delete web method. First of all, we have the insert operation. So let's invoke this post web method. For post, we are not expecting an ID parameter. Now let's get rid of this if else block here. And let's invoke this method add or edit. Now for this post request, the object which is to be inserted will be passed inside the request body. So we'll pass that into this method here, request body. Now we don't have to pass the value for the second parameter. We will go for the default value which is 0. That's what we want for the insert operation. If this method is executed without any error, we can tell that the insert operation is already successful. So we don't need to retrieve anything from the return object. So here we go, we will have the response like this. Status, we'll set the status as 2.1. It indicates that a new record is being created inside the DB. Okay, and here we have the response created successfully. Let's try whether it works or not. First of all, let me retrieve all of the existing records. Sorry, we have to make a GET request. So currently we only have 2 employees. Now to create a new employee, we have to make a post request. The URL will be same as you can see here. Now the object which is to be inserted should be passed inside the request body here. For that, I will copy paste this object. Now we don't have to pass the ID property here. Now for insert operation, it will be automatically set by the MySQL server. It goes in sequential order. So here we have the new employee. You could see this error here, bad string. We have to enclose this property name within quotes, and let's put a comma at the end. Some of the errors will be fixed if you click on this format here. Let's change the employee code to something 87, and let's change the salary. Click on send. Sorry, something went wrong. Here we are executing the global error handler. Let's check the running terminal here. Cannot read properties of undefined reading name. Oh, sorry, we forgot to configure the middleware with body parser. So let's add that here. Body parser. Now let's configure the incoming request body like this. So we just need to invoke this method JSON from body parser. This will convert the incoming request body into JSON format. Let's save this. Hopefully the nodemon will restart the server. Okay, now let's make the request again. Boom, that's it. Created successfully. Let's make the GET request again. So here we have the new employee Olivia Kathleen, and rest of the values are assigned as we have given here. And the ID is in incremental order. In between these records, we had an employee with ID 4. We already deleted him. By the way, after watching this video, I would recommend you to go through the video description where I have given the related videos and recommended premium courses so that you can master the programming languages or frameworks for building projects like this. Now back to our topic. Now let's implement the update operation with this same service method, add or edit. For that, I will just copy paste this post method. Instead of post, we have put. And for this update operation, we need the corresponding employee ID. The request body will contain the updated values of the employee. And as a second parameter, we have to pass the corresponding employee ID. So here we go, request.params.id. Now let's talk about the return object from this service method add or edit. Inside the stored procedure, we have returned the row count as affected rows. So it should be inside the return object, but we don't know how it is returned. So instead of directly going for the destructuring here, let's name the first item inside the array as data. And we'll return that from here. Now back to the put web method. Now we'll receive that inside this object data, and we'll return that inside the response like this. Now let's try to update an existing employee. Let's update this employee with the ID 5. So here is the corresponding URL, and the type of the request will be put. And inside the body tab, we already have the object that we use for creating the same employee. Now I just want to update the name of the employee. So here we go, Olivia Jones. Let's make the request. So here we have the return object. We can talk about that in a bit. Let's check whether it is updated inside the DB or not. Currently we have Olivia Kathleen. Now let's check whether it is updated to the new value or not. So that's it. So the update operation is working perfectly fine. Now let's talk about the return object here. So the first item inside the whole result is an array like this. And here we have the affected rows that is returned from the stored procedure here. Along with this inner array, we have this object by default returned from the MySQL server. And here also we have the property affected rows like we had in our delete operation. But for this stored procedure execution, it is not returning the proper value. Currently, as you can see here, even though we have updated a record, it is returning affected rows as 0. So we are going to depend on this affected rows, that's our select query here. Okay. Now in order to retrieve this property affected rows from this whole array, first of all we have the first array, which is the first item inside this outer array. So here we go, data, then at 0th index we have the inner array, and inside this inner array this object is the first item. It's like a 2D, so here we have the second index 0. Now this is corresponding to the object here. Now from that we have to read this property affected rows. Now instead of doing this, we can go for the in-depth destructuring like this here. First of all, we have to destructure this array. So here we have the array wrapping so that we can retrieve or destructure the first element inside the array, and from that array we have to destructure this first element. So here we have the extra pair of square brackets. So this is corresponding to the inner object. From that we have to destructure this property affected rows. So in effect, we are creating this constant affected rows and we are destructuring its value from the whole array with this in-depth destructuring. Now whichever method you find easy to understand to retrieve this affected rows property from the whole array, you can go for it. For now, I will go for this in-depth destructuring. Now let's return this constant from this service method. Now we got what we want. Now back to the putWeb method. Here I will rename this property as affected rows. Now based on the value of this property, we could tell whether we had an employee with the given ID or not. For now, I will just copy this if-else block here. If affected rows is equal to 0, we will return a for not for response saying that no record with the given ID. Otherwise, we will return this text message updated successfully. Okay, now let's try this. Now let's give a hike for this employee salary here. Send the request. So here we have the message saying that updated successfully. Now it should be updated inside the DB also. See? So in this case, the number of rows affected with the update operation is 1, and thereby we have this proper success message returned from the putWeb method. Now if we try to update an employee which is not present inside this table, then it should return this for not for response. So here we go. Let's try to update an employee with the ID 6. Currently there is no employee with the ID 6. Let's make the request. See, here we have the for not for response for the ID 6. Because the number of affected rows for this update operation will be 0. So without going for an extra query to check whether we have an employee with the given ID before the update operation, I found this is much better with a single stored procedure. After the update operation, number of rows affected with the operation will be returned, and from that we could tell whether we had an employee with the given ID or not. Hope you understood what I'm doing here. Now finally, I want to make few more modifications inside this getWeb method for a given ID. Currently, we have the getWeb method. This getWeb method will return all of the employees from the table. Now to retrieve this employee with the ID 2, we have to make the request like this. Just pass the ID at the end of the URL. That's it. Now actually from an API, for a GET request with a given ID, we always expect a single object like this instead of wrapping it in an array. So first of all, I'm going to change this service method getEmployee by ID. Here we have destructured the first element from the array. Let's retrieve the first element from this array. So here we have the in-depth destructuring. Now of course we want to change the corresponding getWeb method inside this controller. Before that, let's make this request again. Now let's change the corresponding web method. The return value from the service method will be assigned to this property employee. Now we have to change the if clause here. Now if we try to make a get request for a non-existing employee, then the returned array will not have any item, so the destructuring will give the value undefined for this constant record. So instead of checking the length here, we could do this if employee is equal to undefined, we will return this for not for response. Okay, otherwise we'll return the exact employee object. Let me save this back to the Thunder client. Let's try to retrieve an employee with the ID 11. Boom, that's it. So that's it guys. In this Node.js tutorial, we have implemented MySQL CRUD operations: insert, update, delete, and retrieve. Subscribing to this channel if you haven't yet. Also, please like and share this video with your friends and colleagues so that they can also benefit from this. Have a nice day. Bye.